So today's opener is going to resemble what our test is going to look like next week and what your quiz is going to look like tomorrow. The last two problems, solving inequalities, is what your quiz will be over tomorrow. So make sure you know how to do those two. All right, the first problem, we're going to start, how we always do, by circling our variable and drawing our line of equality. Once I do that, I need to get the variable a by itself. In order to get the a by itself, I have to do the opposite of multiplying, which will be division. So I'm going to divide each side by 14. I bring down my variable a. Now if I go to type in my calculator, -35 divided by 14, I'm going to end up with a decimal. I do not want the answers in decimal form. You need to leave it in fraction form. However, because we're leaving it in fraction form, you need to make sure that you have it in simplest form. So you're going to look at -35 and 14 and determine what they're both divisible by. In this case, they're both divisible by 7. So I'm going to take -35 and divide it by 7, and I'm going to end up with -6. Then I'm going to take -14 and divide it by 7 and get 2. So my final answer is going to be -3/2 equals A. Let's take a look at the second one. You have b over 9 equals 2/3. b over 9 means b divided by 9. In order to get the b by itself, we do the inverse operation of division, which will be multiplication. So we're going to multiply each side by 9. Now, what I'm going to show in the bottom, you guys don't have to show. So what I'm going to show in the bottom in the red, you guys don't have to show. Your calculators will do this work for you, but I like to work everything out longhand. So we're going to take 2/3 times 9. Now I have a whole number here. In order to make a whole number a fraction, we're going to put a 1 up under it. When multiplying fractions, I like to reduce at the very beginning. So I'm going to see what numerators I can reduce, if any, denominator. So I'm going to look, I can't reduce 2 and 3, I can't reduce 2 and 1. So then I go to my next numerator, 9. I can't reduce 9 and 1 because 1's already in simplest form, but I can reduce 9 and 3. Both of these numbers are divisible by 3. So 9 divided by 3 will be 3. 3 divided by 3 will be 1. The next step I do is multiply my numerators. So I'm going to take 2 times 3, which will equal 6. Then 1 times 1, which is 1. Now, I want my answer in simplest form. So I'm going to take 6 over 1 and just drop the 1 because I want it, again, in simplest form. 6 over 1 and 6 mean the exact same thing. And the last one on this side. I'm going to circle my variable C, draw my line of equality. Now this is going to be a little different from what we've done in the past because this time you have a -1/4. So you really need to pay attention to that when we get to the next step here. So to get the C by itself, I'm going to have to get rid of the 5/12. I do that by doing the opposite of addition, which is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 5/12 from each side. Cancel on my left. I bring down my variable C, my equals on my line of equality. With your calculators, you guys are able to take -1/4 minus 5/12. I don't have a calculator here, so I'm going to have to find a common denominator. A common denominator for 4 and 12, I'm going to pick the lowest one. You could take 4 times 12 to get 48 and use that, but I really don't want to work with larger numbers. So I'm going to use the common denominator of 12. If I would skip count by 4, I would count 4, 8, 12, 16, and then if I'd skip count by 12, I'd do 12, 24. Well, the lowest number they both share is 12. So I'm only going to have to change the denominator of one fraction here. So then I have to think to myself, so again, what I'm showing in the pink, you don't have to do. 4 times what gets me to 12? 3. So whatever I multiply my bottom number by, I have to multiply my top number by. So then I'll take -1 times 3. Well, -1 times 3 will be -3. So my new fraction is -3/12 minus 5/12. Now that I have a common denominator, I can subtract my numerators. When I go to subtract my numerators, it's going to be -3 minus 5, which will equal -8. My denominators stay the same. However, I'm not quite finished because I need to take this fraction and simplify it. I have to think to myself, 8 and 12, what are they both divisible by? They're both divisible by 2, or I can go ahead and divide them both by 4 as well. So I'm going to divide them by 4 to create less work for myself. So negative 8 divided by 4 will be negative 2. 12 divided by 4 will be 3. So your final answer should be C equals negative 2 over 3. All right, let's take a look at the back side. Circle my variable, draw my line of equality. So now I have 5, 6 times d equals 30. In order to get the d by itself, I'm going to divide each side by 5, 6. I'm going to cancel on my left, bring down my variable, my equal sign. Now with you guys, if you take 30 divided by 5, 6 in your calculators, you're going to end up with the answer. Again, I don't have a calculator, so the work I'm about to show in the green here, you don't necessarily have to do, but remember, if you choose to do it on your quiz or test, you earn extra credit points. So when we divide fractions, we use the acronym Keep, Flip, Change, KFC. So I'm going to keep my first fraction or number the same, which is 30. I'm going to flip my second fraction, which is 5 over 6, to 6 over 5. And I'm going to change my division sign to multiplication. Now I have a whole number times a fraction. In order to change that whole number to a fraction, I'm just going to put a 1 up under it. And now I have a multiplication problem. Multiplying fractions, the next step I like to do is to go ahead and reduce any numerator with any denominator. So I can't reduce 30 and 1 because 1's in simplest form. But I can reduce 30 and 5. Both of these numbers are divisible by 5. So 30 divided by 5 will equal 6, and 5 divided by 5 will equal 1. The next step would be to multiply your numerators. So 6 times 6 equals 36. Multiply your denominators, 1 times 1 is 1. Now, because I want my answer in simplest form, I'm going to drop that 1 as the denominator. 36 over 1 is the exact same thing as 36. So your final answer should be D equals 36. Now we have, as the last two problems, solving inequalities. Inequalities are just like solving one-step equations with the difference that you won't have an equal sign, you'll have an inequality sign. And the second difference is going to be only, so it's not when you add or subtract, but only when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you will flip that inequality sign around. So let's take a look at our first one. You have e plus 6 is less than or equal to 1. Circle my variable, draw my line of equality, because my goal is still to get that variable by itself. In order to get that variable by itself, we do the opposite of plus 6, which will be minus 6. So I'm going to subtract 6 from each side. I bring down my variable, and I bring down my inequality sign. Now, I'm subtracting by 6. I'm not multiplying or dividing by a negative number. I'm just using subtraction. So you do not flip your inequality sign here. It remains the same. So then I have to think to myself, 1 minus 6. 1 minus 6 is going to end up getting me negative 5. And that will be my final answer. The next one is f divided by negative 2 is less than 6. So I have my line of equality. I circle my variable. In order to get the variable by itself, I'm going to have to do the opposite of division, which will be multiplication. So I'm going to have to multiply each side by negative 2. So now I bring down my variable f. Oops, sorry, I need to show that that cancels. So now I bring down my variable f. Now my inequality sign, I multiplied by a negative number. Since I am multiplying by a negative number, my inequality sign will flip. So now it's f is greater than, and then I solve. So 6 times negative 2 will equal negative 12. And that will be my final answer. Please make sure you have all your work shown that I expect you to show. Put your names on your openers and then pass them back towards Mr. McFarland. The next thing that you guys need to do is either work on Khan Academy, the topics that were just added to your list as of yesterday, or worksheet 1.8. Worksheet 1.8 is due today. Tomorrow you guys will have a quiz over solving one-step inequalities.